Hello, everyone. Welcome to CXO Spice. CXO Spice is a platform for thought leaders to share their point of view on innovation and explain how to make it happen in real world. I'm your host, Helen Yu, and our topic today is AI in finance. Our special guest is Gilg, President and Chief Product Officer of Cloud ERP at SAP. Yang and I had an engaging panel discussion at SAP Sapphire early June. Our panel was well received. We're thrilled to keep the conversation going and dive even deeper here today. Hello, Yang. Glad to be reconnected. Welcome to CXO Spice.
Yeah, thanks so much, Helen. It's great to connect again. Great to see you, and thanks so much for having me.
Well, great to have you here too. So before we dive into our discussion, could you share your background and your role at SAP?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm responsible for our cloud ERP portfolio, which is basically our flagship product around S/4HANA Cloud, which is our next generation ERP platform, but also our finance portfolio, where we cover various areas in the office of the CFO, as well as our supply chain portfolio. So that's basically product management, development, product marketing, and operations. So a pretty wide range of applications, you could say, the core of what SAP is doing.
Wow, that's a lot of responsibilities, and you have such an impressive journey, Yang. But that's a separate conversation for another day. Let's start with the big elephant in the room here, right? There's a lot talks about AI taking jobs, reshaping roles in finance. How has the role of CFO or the finance department shifted in the past few years?
Yeah, I think in general, the role of the CFO is shifting, and we have been talking about this also for quite some years, but I do believe AI will accelerate this shift now from purely focusing on operational tasks, which is still taking up a lot of the time of the finance departments, maybe some say up to 80%, really day to day, crunching numbers, doing spreadsheets, doing reports, and so on. Really towards becoming more a partner to the CEO, being engaged in the strategic discussions, where to take the company, where to expand, in which new markets, maybe which new market categories, global expansion, and so on. So definitely that is a shift that we are seeing. And therefore, of course, to free up this time, technology is needed. And that's why I believe now with what we're seeing with artificial intelligence, that will be a big lever across the various disciplines underneath the office of the CFO to really accomplish that shift. And you're asking about AI taking jobs. Of course, that's always the big discussion. Also, when I talk to customers, that's always there. And for me, I haven't really seen in our customer base that the threat is so much that jobs are being taken. It's really more shifting the scope of the job. And many employers actually embrace that, especially in the finance departments, because they don't necessarily want to spend so much time on number crunching. And sometimes it's excruciating and the amount of Excel sheets that are flying around and keeping them up to date and so on. And many people are asking for help to be more productive, to be more efficient here, and actually free up some time to do more value-add analysis and work. So therefore, I think what's definitely changing, and that will require also education and training, is the nature of the job, the scope of the job. But the people themselves, they and their expertise will certainly be needed also in the age of AI.
Well, having started my career in finance, I echo what you just shared, Yang. Obviously, I left finance because of the mundane, right? Because of the manual-intensive job. And so given these shifts, it's interesting to explore which specific AI innovations have had the most significant impact on finance function. Can you share an example of AI innovation that has made a real difference?
Yeah, so first of all, I think there's really many disciplines, starting from things like areas like order to cash or cash and liquidity management, financial operations, but also compliance or even business operations that lend themselves extremely well to AI innovation or basically to leveraging AI to create better business outcomes. Specifically, global business services, I mean, that's all about shared service center. We have seen already some early success there with our AI-powered solutions, where we really help then to analyze the myriad of incoming requests, I would say, that customers have, specifically in finance. And typically it's about, the bill isn't accurate, I haven't ordered this, there's something missing, and so on. And then obviously people need to go through that. And that is something that AI can already pre-filter, give a very high score of confidence on some of the items, and then basically already process them and execute them. So a lot of those requests can automatically be handled and put aside. And then there are some requests where the agent has to come in and do something. And then even here, we start to then actually help this agent to do the job with the system proposing activities. And they could say, hey, I think this is a valid request here by this customer. Why don't you offer them a credit note? The system would create already a complaint case for that. Then the credit note would be triggered, and then a communication would be drafted by the system that goes back to this respective customers. And all that happens in a very short period of time, which then increases directly the customer satisfaction. Because at the end of the day, often that's a complaint is an opportunity to increase loyalty with the customer. And we have seen that specifically in shared service. And we talked about the changing role of finance. Yeah, all of a sudden, the shared services agents, they have a hand in customer satisfaction and loyalty of the customer. Besides the fact that, of course, you have much less processing time, a higher efficiency in the work that agents are doing. So I think very tangible examples how AI can help some of those mundane tasks, as you called them, to process them quicker, make the company more efficient, and increase the customer satisfaction.
Well, I love that because you basically gave an example of how you can leverage these AI innovations as a competitive advantage, right? Because that leads to customer loyalty and growth, obviously. So building on that, as finance departments integrate these innovations, how can they optimize AI to effectively transition from manual intensive processes to a more strategic focus?
Yeah, I think they really, if we look into some of the numbers, for instance, some experts say that companies lose about 5% of their revenue to fraud each year, which is totaling over $4.5 trillion globally.
Wow.
So that is things that are out there. And the question is really, how can businesses now educate themselves about some of the rules and regulations as well that are coming in more and more frequently. So what is even then fraud, and how do you detect it? And that could be different by country even, or by region. So I think companies really need to take a very structured approach to educate their people for sure. And then also identify the respective process areas where there's the biggest bang for the buck, so to speak, and really address those cases then heads on. So not sprinkle it too much, but rather say, hey, take the example I've given here on the compliance side. So let's focus on improving fraud detection, for instance. And then that is kind of the strategic intent, and then really break it down into what are the measures that we can take and how can AI help, and are there maybe solutions available already that do that, or is this something we need to custom build and just leverage the technology? So really breaking it down from the strategic objective to, let's say, decrease fraud and for a company, all the way down to concrete measures and tools that can be leveraged.
Well, I love that because you started with business objective, right? And then customer-centric focus rather than the two focus. So that's absolutely great thinking. So thank you for the guidance there. Well, we all know that automation defeats its purpose without considering how these advancements align with ethical standards or regulatory compliance. As you alluded earlier, can you provide an example of how finance integrates these essential aspects into AI-driven financial decision making?
Yeah, I think specifically in finance, it is of course critical to look or to take ethical considerations into account also when it comes to decision making. And I mean that's probably true across all functional domains, but finance has always a very strong proximity to compliance overall. So that's why we're also talking about AI has to be responsible. So the integrity is really the foundation to finance, and this principle then also extend to AI applications, of course, as well. And so what I think is that responsible AI practices, they should actually ensure that an AI system operates ethically, fairly, and transparently. And that's also how we do it at SAP from the very beginning to make sure that this is given with all the AI cases that we build as part of our solutions. And that gives then also, of course, the ease of mind to the CFO that data privacy rules, for instance, are adhered to. GDPR is a big deal in Europe, for instance. Data privacy and making sure data is not being used from individuals without their consent. There's other regulations, and again, that goes back to sometimes this is really very different by region and country. But the AI has to consider that. So the regional differences have to flow into that as well while we are building a generic solution and we leverage generic capabilities technically. We have to build that on top and make sure that whatever regulation is valid in a specific country is adhered to. And that's typically, take bias out, data privacy I mentioned, and those kind of topics. So even when we do prompt engineering, how do we make sure that the result comes back free of bias and so on? And that's in my mind to speak a little bit more technical than where we have to take stricter control of the language model that's underneath our AI requests. And that is exactly what we are working on at SAP. And of course, data privacy specifically is a very big value for us, and all the data that we use across our customer base, we only do with the consensus of our customers and of course in an anonymized way. And I think this way gives you enough insights and value, so you don't need basically the personal data or expose any personal identifiable data of anybody. But it is important that AI adheres to that.
Well, that's really profound, Yang. I actually walk away from SAP Sapphire, right? Really impressed with how much emphasis you put on the ethical standard. I love the 3R, the responsible, relevant, and reliable when you talk about business AI. So thanks for underscoring the importance of that. And we all know data is the new currency in the AI era, right? With SAP has 300 million users, that's your competitive advantage. But how has AI improved the data processing and enhanced real-time decision-making accuracy and accessibility?
Yeah, so first of all, this comes back to the capability to process mass volumes of data. And technology has evolved significantly over the years, and that's also where I believe cloud technology emerges or converges with artificial intelligence technology. Because I feel without the compute power that's available now at scale, almost unlimited in the cloud, only enables this now, that this is possible. And we had this debate between, can you do those things then also on premise? And yes, you can, but it's just much, much more limited if you look into the processing power that is needed to really drive insights in real time and support real-time decision-making support, as you said. So those tools are basically ready now to exceed the human capabilities in many financial disciplines. And that is something that also research that we have commissioned from SAP Insights found. And this can then actually help predict things like late payments and identify where collections activities might be the most effective, or reduce the processing time and boost the operations in financial close by enhancing the account reconciliation capabilities. So those are all things that can happen in real time, but it does require, of course, the ability to crunch the data, any volume of data. And that is true for a single customer, but it's also true then for scenarios that go across multiple customers. And that's what I mentioned earlier, and you said that too. We have a very, very large customer base, and we are lucky to have some of the largest companies in the world that we can call our customers. And most of them have given consent, again, to use their data in an anonymized way. So that, of course, increases the data volumes significantly. And if we can then find ways to tap into that data treasure, which is all operational data. So basically data that is created while companies drive their operations. And you can imagine there's a lot of insights hidden in this data, and some of it absolutely makes sense to provide in real time. Some of it might not be critical for real time, but overall, we do see now the capability technically to do that.
Well, I wish I had a tool like SAP when I was an accountant in an oil and gas company. Well, those days were brutal, 12 to 14 hours a day closing the book. But I'm so glad to see the progress we've made, right? Just in even last couple years. So how should organizations balance technology advancement with cultural readiness to achieve the successful AI implementation and adoption?
Yeah, I think that's a really critical question in my mind, because at the end of the day, as always, technology is technology. It's just a tool, so to speak. And at the end of the day, it will only be successful if there is a cultural readiness to do that. And AI has a lot to do with trust of people. First of all, and we mentioned it at the beginning, that they are not making themselves redundant by using AI tooling. And then second, when you think about the enterprise world and recommendations that are being given by an AI, do I really trust now to execute on that? If I talk about mission critical processes like a demand supply match, but even what we just discussed, accelerating the financial close, because at the end, there is no gray zone in finance when it comes to right or wrong. So this is the beauty of this discipline, and it has to be right every time when we talk about financial compliance and what is then also reported and exposed, for instance, to the financial markets or any shareholder. So therefore, to create a culture here that makes this possible is extremely important, and it has to do with change management. So implementing AI or introducing AI in an organization has to be, in my mind, accompanied by a change management program. And that should then create a culture of curiosity, of innovation, of learning. I mentioned that job profiles are changing. People need to embrace that and be willing to actually learn and pick this up. And then, of course, again, front and center is trust. And that will happen over time. And it will happen in increments. This will not be a big bang where all of a sudden, massive amounts of processes are either automated or get significant amounts of insights that you didn't have before. This is really an incremental process where you get more and more mature. And as the trust improves, customers will then also use it more, and then they will also see better outcomes. So I think that it is really a journey, and that's why you have to accompany this journey with a change management program, and this really needs to then become part of a company culture to embrace the use of AI.
Well said. I mean, three things you mentioned, trust, change management program, and then you don't have to have the patience, right, to go through that journey. Thank you for these advice for balancing the technology advancement with cultural readiness. Let's switch gear a little bit, talk about Green Ledger and its impact on sustainability. So what strategic advantage does AI offer in aligning financial decision-making with sustainability goals?
Yeah, so first of all, that goes back to the changing role of the CFO. I feel the CFO has a much bigger hand, and often even the chief sustainability officer reports to the CFO or when it comes to meeting ESG targets, and everybody has them. And of course, the largest companies on the planet that are contributing significantly to the CO2 and have and carbon impact, they will be regulated the most and the earliest. And for just to give you one data point, there have been globally regulations, 600 voluntary and mandatory sustainability regulations that came out this year alone. And so it's a lot of stuff that companies have to digest. And therefore, this becomes, of course, a question first and foremost of compliance. And we see that companies are asked more and more to not only report on sustainability and on their carbon objectives and if they achieve them or not, but they have to really account for them. And so then this becomes this whole thing gets a finance grade, so to speak, similar to what we see in financial accounting. And I mentioned that there is no gray zone then anymore. There is either right or wrong. And so therefore, the same will happen then for the accounting towards sustainability and specifically the carbon footprint, the carbon emission. And then, of course, we have had the discussion already for the last couple of years. Are we talking about scope 2 or scope 3, which then really goes into the supply chain and the supply networks, where companies do typically a good job or have a good handle on is really within their own company, or also when it comes to production. But most of the carbon footprint is actually created downstream when it comes to distribution of the produced goods and so on. So therefore, we are talking again about a significant data play here because what we do at SAP with our software typically is we bring together the flow of value with the flow of material. So every time a material or a product is being produced or distributed, that is creating and triggering a financial document that's created or a journal entry. What we have done is we've built on top of that existing infrastructure and started to track now the carbon emission as well. And we can do that with other natural resources then because things like water and so on, it's just a question of time. So therefore, I feel we have the infrastructure and the technology in place in order to do that. And we see the regulations that make this more and more mandatory, so really making this a compliance play. And that is why the Green Ledger for us is so critical. First of all, as a core function of ERP, but also as a main pillar of compliance for companies. And compliance is something where SAP, that has made SAP big to begin with, when we started with the first financial systems. And that's why we see huge opportunity here to help customers really achieve their sustainability goals.
Well, I learned something from you, Yang. I did not realize there are 600 regulatory goals out there, right? Did you say 600? Wow. And yeah,
and growing by the day.
mind-blowing. I love what you just said, right? SAP brings the flow of the value with the flow of materials. That's so critical. So thank you for doing that. Well, here comes to our last question. What advice would you give to CFOs and CIOs on where to start with AI automation?
Yeah, I think what I said earlier is probably the most critical item here is you have to test the waters. You you cannot do this with a big bang, and believe I buy now a tool and now I have everything AI enabled. So we really have to start small. You have to iterate, so you don't jump in there blindly, but really learn, and don't expect miracles from the very beginning. I think that's also something we learned here on the software side. We also started small, and really thought about what are things that customers probably adopt very, very early on. Things like a digital assistant, which customers like to use to interact and ask simple questions. And then it gets more and more sophisticated. And then we touched on that, Helen, the topic of data. I mean, if you have bad data, you won't have great insights. So therefore, it is absolutely critical to also look into how can you improve your data quality. So start a data initiative, and maybe also here focus on a specific domain. Maybe start with financial data, or certain other areas of master data that you have in the company, and then move from there. The other thing I would say is you absolutely have to get your team on board. We talked about change management. I think it is critical to really anchor that in the culture of your company and have the people excited. And what I've seen, which works pretty well, is you build a network of champions inside the company, so-called multiplier. You help them understand the technology and make them a multiplier, really, as I said, for the broader organization. So you really get the people behind it, and they don't look at this as something that's now being imposed on them top down because AI is now such a hype and we need to do AI. They really need to understand what's in it for me. I mean, we're all human beings, and at the end, you always ask your question, just what you said earlier when you were working in finance. How can this be easier for me? And how can I get rid of doing all those tasks I don't really want to do? And how can I do them maybe faster or automated? And if people see that this is happening, then they actually get excited, and then they build the trust. And that's why it's first and foremost really a people thing, to get the teams behind this. And then I believe you can really create the momentum in a company that then becomes also to a certain extent the culture. So that's how I would approach it.
Wow, we're very well said, right? That's impactful advice for CFO and CIOs on where to start with AI automation. Thank you, Yang, for sharing your invaluable insights on the transformative role of AI in finance. So let me recap, right? The 4 key takeaways from our discussion today. Number 1 is the changing finance roles. Finance is coming into its own as a strategic force, giving more directions and momentum to organizational growth. There's never been a more vivid time to be in finance. AI offers finance team the opportunity to show their creative problem solving and personalized storytelling skills based on data-driven insights. And number 2 is, if you want to capitalize the big wins with AI, you have to understand, the increased impact in finance, right? Making sure that how you can leverage that to enhance your data processing, data making, decision-making process, improve the real-time accuracy in operations. I love some of the examples you shared earlier today, especially on fraud detection and automation. Thirdly is ethics and compliance. And then it's so essential for finance to integrate ethical standards and regulatory compliance into AI-driven decision to ensure responsible and transparent technology use. I learned from you there are 600 regulatory goals out there already and growing every day. Thank you for SAP for being, bringing the flow of value with the flow of materials. And then number 4 is the tech versus culture, right? And successful AI implementation requires aligning technology advancement with organizational culture to ensure both are prepared for a smooth transition. Love what you said about team, about trust, about the change management, and then data and patience. So thank you, Yang, for sharing your invaluable insights on AI in finance with us today. Kudos to SAP for the continuous innovation, reshaping the industry and guiding finance leaders toward strategic, ethical, sustainable, and effective use of technology. And thank you everyone for tuning in today. Stay hungry, stay bold, and stay grateful.